That's right, Supriya. It's raining bonanza for over 1 crore government employees. The centre today announced a 23.5% hike in salaries and pensions for government staff in line with the 7th Pay Commission recommendations. The move will make the government poorer by over 1 lakh crore rupees a year. Economists say the pay hike could also stoke inflation at a time when prices of essential goods are already on the rise, apart from pushing up the fiscal deficit. But Finance Minister Jaitley claims he has already accounted for the additional payout in his FY17 budget.
The government is hoping that the higher disposable income will give a big boost to demand for consumer goods and revive growth. In fact, it is double treat for India's consumption story because along with the pay hike, the cabinet has also approved the Model Shop and Establishment Act, which simply put means that retailers will be able to run their businesses 24/7, 365 days a year. The move will lead to creation of more jobs and, more importantly, create a level playing field between online and offline retailers. But will consumer demand get the much needed big push with the twin moves? That is our top story right here on India Tonight.
It's a big bonanza for Sarkari Babus. Over 47 lakh government employees and 53 lakh pensioners have a lot to cheer about. The cabinet today approved the pay hike suggested by the Justice Mathur-led 7th Pay Commission, a move which will cost the exchequer around 85,000 crores this fiscal. The government believes higher salaries will not only boost demand but will also help in retaining top talent in the government.
One thing which is accepted, that government salaries have to come at a respectable level, or have to come to a respectable level so that the government is able to attract the best talent. Will have two obvious consequences. There will be more money in the market to spend, and therefore its impact will be on more than one front. It also has an ability to generate more demand.
Under the revised pay hikes, a government employee at the entry level will get a minimum pay of 18,000 rupees as against the existing 7,000 rupees per month, while 2,25,000 per month is the maximum pay for the apex scale. The cabinet secretary will make around 2,50,000 rupees per month.
They'll be implemented with effect from 1st January 2016. And the arrears, since we are towards the end of June, would also be paid in this year.
Moreover, 2 committees will be set up for studying the payout of allowances and streamlining implementation of the national pension system. The pay hikes will give a much needed booster shot by fueling consumption across sectors, helping people save and invest more. But some experts believe it could be inflationary in the medium to long term. It clearly is the consumption growth the government is right now betting on, given how investments have been stuck despite the best efforts. Ruchi Bhatia, ET Now, New Delhi.
Now, Justice A.K. Mathur, who drafted the Pay Commission recommendations, which have now been accepted by the Cabinet, spoke first to ET Now's Gaurang Sinha, and he admitted that the approved salary hike will be a drain on the exchequer, but the benefits for the economy far outweigh the stresses.
Economy is bound to, open up because the people are getting the money in their hand.
Right.
So obviously they will have a more purchasing capacity, and they will buy good things in the market.
Right.
Especially the middle class will be stand largely benefited.
Yeah, no, the second aspect, so and this is something you warned about, is that while there'll be more money in the hands of the middle class, one aspect which could one section of the population which could be affected perhaps negatively as well is that consumption will increase in the middle class, and prices could rise, which would of course impact the lower and the least developed, the below poverty line section. So what do you see is the overall impact there?
Well, that of course will be there, because of course a person who is just below poverty line, as you call it.
Correct.
And naturally, if the prices are going to increase,
correct,
and it is bound to increase because people are going to get the money.
Correct.
So when the purchasing capacity increases, market floors opens up.
Right.
And the people, when more they buy, more production is there.
Right.
Economy is booming. then in that case, persons who are at least who are stagnating, who are poor poverty lines, they will of course will be.
So would you then say, sir, that that is obviously something which the government will have to keep in mind while, of course, implementing the report? Because is that something which the government will have to think about?
Well, that shouldn't go into all these conjectures what government will do, because the government has a very difficult task to decide.
Correct.
And because looking to the economy as it exists, the government will have a very difficult job to take a call on that.
But time to get you the real analysis. So how do government salaries really stack up against salaries in the private sector? And now that the 7th pay panel has been put out into effect, we've got Aon Hayward, which has done a comparison and finds the private sector salaries for the entry in the junior level employees is lower than the government sector. India Inc. says this may force the private sector to actually hike wages or dole out other incentives to attract talent, especially since the government job still perceived to carry a status symbol of sorts. The scale starts to tilt in favor of compensation in the private sector when it comes to the mid-management level.
The disparity, of course, increases in favor of a senior management employee in the private sector, with compensation going up to 64 lakhs per annum as against 50 lakhs in the government. And it's totally skewed in favor of the private sector when it comes to the top management. Frankly, it's not even a comparison you can make as far as top management salaries are concerned between private and public sector. And that's, of course, according to an Aon Hewitt survey, which explains the vast difference between the two sectors for the top management. This is, of course, without considering any long-term incentives such as ESOPs, which private sector employees do seem to be getting as well. Supriya's got more perspective on the big story.
I do. I was actually going to share the larger perspective of top management at ET now and their salaries. I thought you're going to be speaking a little more about that, but we'll take it to Maithili Vasnurmat for more perspective there. Thank you, Maithili, for being with us. All jokes put apart, is the impact of pay commissions, recommendations on government's finances that has obviously hogged the limelight and the debate here. I just want to pick your brains on how do you think this is really going to impact the fiscal math at this stage?
Well, it's almost a given that the moment you appoint a pay commission, the cabinet will accept the recommendations. It's basically a fait accompli. No government in the past has ever been able to reject or even modify a pay commission recommendation. So it's not surprising that the government has accepted this. The silver lining perhaps is that sometimes in the past government have upped the recommendations, and here it doesn't seem to have done that. As far as the fiscal deficit is concerned, it will definitely be impacted. The impact will be adverse. But maybe the government hopes that now that they've appointed a FRBM review committee under Mr. N.K. Singh, and that committee is likely to suggest a range rather than a number for the fiscal deficit, it has some elbow room and can perhaps afford to take on this hit. But the larger question one really needs to ask is that, is this the best use of taxpayer money? Should the government be using taxpayer money, which is scarce in our country, to pamper a section of society which is already sufficiently pampered? Or should that money be used to build roads, bridges, power plants, what have you? So I think that is a larger question that society at large must ask the government, as also its civil servants.
Right. I think the other concern, of course, is on inflation, because more money gets into the market, as well as you put more money in the hands of the consumer, it finds its way back into the economy. So what kind of an impact is this likely to have on inflation?
As far as the impact of the recommendations and the government's acceptance on inflation is concerned, yes, it will be inflationary. In fact, the Reserve Bank of India in its last bi-monthly monetary policy had cautioned that the pay commission recommendations would be inflationary, because you are going to give more spending power into the hands of a section of the population, and this will have a ripple effect, because it's not just the central government servants but also the state governments, the public sector, the teachers, university lecturers, all of whom will get a higher payout, as a result of which there will be an impact on inflation at a time when food inflation is already inching up. The question remains that, is this higher inflation something that the country can afford, particularly at the time when we have got inflation back under control with so much difficulty? Chances are it will make the Reserve Bank of India's target of 5% for January next year that much more difficult to attain.
Frankly, it will, and many questions being raised whether the war against inflation in any ways is going to ease out. But very quickly, the aim is to really spur consumption-led growth. Do you think at least that aim will be achieved?
As far as the impact on growth is concerned, yes, it will certainly spur consumption. And companies, particularly FMCG companies, consumer durable and non-durable companies, might celebrate. But that's at a micro level. The more important question that we need to really answer is that even if we do want to spur economic growth, is this the best way of doing it? Because this is consumption-led growth, and consumption-led growth always comes to usually comes to a sorry pass, because ultimately what you need is investment in a country like India. If consumption is not accompanied or is not followed soon after by investment, then you will have an overeating of the economy, and that again is something that the government needs to question, that is this the best way of spurring growth? Isn't investment-led growth far better for an economy than consumption-led growth, even if in the short term it seems more attractive?
Fair point, Maithili, but I'm guessing the government's logic here is that you kickstart the cycle with this consumption-led growth. In any case, they've put in a massive impetus on government expenditure, and hopefully private investment will kick in 6 to 12 months from now, and that should put the economy in a good spot. But that's the bet here. Whether it'll happen or not, I guess we'll have to give it some time. Thanks as always for joining in with that perspective. That's our consulting editor, Maithili Bhosnurmat, analysing that government's move and its impact on the broader economy. But like Supriya told a short while ago, it's a twin delight really for India's consumption story. The government has also allowed shops and other establishments to remain open 24/7. This, we believe, is a big reform move that's likely to generate more employment, even as it provides a level playing field between online and offline retailers. ET Now's Nayanthara Rai joins us with more details. Nayanthara, clearly now women can shop till they drop. Why women? I say even men, quite literally.
So this is the second booster shot from the government for consumption. I'm talking about the Model Shop and Establishment Act that envisages cinema halls, shopping malls, retail outlets and restaurants being open for business 24/7, 365 days a year. So giving the flexibility to all of such establishments to decide their own opening hours as well as closing hours. Allowing them to be open, like I said, 365 days a year. That means also on national holidays as well as all festivals. The catch, of course, being our states going to come on board. Now, for the definition, for the sake of definition, under this act, it covers all public amusement establishments as well as warehouses that must have a minimum of 10 employees. So that's one of the preconditions if any establishment wants to be open 24/7, 365 days a year. What's not covered are government offices, the RBI, insurance companies, factories. There's also a bit of women empowerment over here. So for the first time after the manufacturing sector and outside of factories, women being allowed to work in the night shift. The catch being the employers must provide safety. They must provide a safe transportation back for all of these women, as well as other facilities, for example, baby creches. Now let's talk about the hurdles. Like I said, are the states going to come on board? All of this is part of the concurrent list. Trade unions, are they going to agree to this? Law and order, you're talking about restaurants and malls being open all night. Who's going to be in charge of security? Are we going to have a law and order problem or not? The main idea, of course, being to boost consumption so that we can shop round the clock, but also to generate jobs. Do we have enough skilled workforce for this or not? So these are some of the challenges. But I'm going to depart with a sobering thought. Don't think that you can shop round the clock, eat round the clock, but also drink round the clock. The bars, pubs are not going to be covered under this. That all comes under the excise department, and we are not picking up anything at all that the excise department has any plans of allowing you to drink all night. Back to you guys.
Sandeep, rework those Friday night plans. That ain't happening. So you've got to be grounded, and you can perhaps be out only for a very little while, as Nayanthara was pointing out there. Important clarification at that end of the story. But thank you very much, Nayanthara, for being with us. We really move on to the big boost for the retailers, and we at ET Now did speak to a whole host of stakeholders. Listen into what they had to say about how this really changes their business.
It's going to be across the board positive impact. I think not only will more jobs get created, obviously there'll be better sales for retailers, and on top of that there's more revenue to the government, because as consumption goes up, that means revenue to the government as well. So I think both the moves today are very progressive from a consumption point of view, much needed in retail given the way things have been for the last couple of years.
If you understand the GDP ratio versus the retail employment, retail is a big contributor to the entire retail GDP, to the overall GDP of the country. So if the GDP runs faster, and what we are currently hearing is that the new policies, especially the pay commission impact, is supposed to be about 0.7% of the GDP, it will be a multiplier effect of that. And same way with the retail model policy, we should see another impact. So I believe that yes, there can be an impact between 50 to 80 basis point higher level, which can directly result into boosting up of consumption as well as on employment.
Boost in consumption will definitely take place. I think it'll, as far as the retail business is concerned, I think it'll have a two-pronged impact. One will be the pent-up demand and the one-time payments which the employees will get, and of course everyone likes to spend once there is a sort of a windfall that comes their way, which happens whenever the pay commission takes place, and therefore they would like to consume, and therefore the retail business should do well.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.